Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David, and as ever for UCL Fantasy content I am joined by Aaron as we prepare for the final match of the Champions League group stages for the 2023-24 season. It is usually the most exciting time in UCL Fantasy because there's so many different teams to choose from. Unfortunately, the worst teams in the competition are about to leave and it's going to become much harder to pick players in the next rounds. So does it feel like something of a farewell going into match day 6, Aaron? What are your thoughts and feelings as we head into the final round of the group stages?
This is everybody's most dreaded match day. This is normally where you'll have like a normal score. A lot of people will have a kind of like, I guess, recent weeks in FPL is the best way to describe this, where the scores are just horrible. The assets that you think were going to do well don't, or they get rested. So, it's just so unpredictable. Match day 6, terrible scores, historically, but the people who do well in match day 6 have really, really good scores because they have such a big advantage over everybody else.
In a way, it kind of feels like last day of term in the sense that who knows what's going to happen. You know, all rhyme and reason goes out the window, especially if it's a bunch of year 13s leaving. Maybe they'll start pranking the teachers, by which we mean managers will start rotating assets, things like that. Everything you think you know goes out the window, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I guess the biggest thing is that we're going to say goodbye to 16 teams. So in terms of like fantasy, it makes it easier to start to focus on certain players. They're not as spread thin. It is a bad thing in terms of the teams start to mold to look the same. But round of 16 has always some really, really big scores. But unfortunately, we do have to say goodbye to some assets. This is the last time you'll get to use them. So just embrace the chaos. If you like a player, just get them in, enjoy them while you have them before they go into Europa League or out the competition.
Well, as we are in this final round of the group stages, we're obviously going to talk about how you got on in match day 5, what your plans are for match day 6, and look at some of the key matches to target. But before we have a look at that, I thought I'd just ask you how you feel the Champions League has gone so far this season in, a case of, has it gone as you expected? Has it been, an enjoyable run for UCL Fantasy so far? Any shock, surprises, anything you weren't expecting? Yeah, what's your thoughts and feelings so far on how it's been?
Well, in our podcast, we ended up doing like a group prediction and stuff like that, and there were a few groups that we've called exactly, but there's been others that have thrown up a lot of surprises, either teams not performing or just teams overperforming. I think Group A is a perfect example where Man United are last at the currently, and Copenhagen, they're playing amazing compared to previous years. Like it really shows that investment that they've gotten because of Champions League, the standard of coaching. I think they're a really difficult team to break down. Galatasaray, like they're pretty much were always a finish third, get Europa League, but make the appearance, like get the appearance money. But I think both of them have played really, really well. And then Man United, we all know what's happening with them. And then you get Bayern Munich, who we got what we expected. So Group A, I feel like has it all in terms of a reflection of the entire Champions League, where some teams have performed as you would expect. Some bigger names haven't, but there's been some other pleasant like performances from some teams that you just thought were going to be rollovers, except Antwerp. But this time.
So with those changing dynamics of European football, which is always really nice to see when there's a sort of transition from, I don't want to say an old guard, but yeah, there was a time, especially when I was growing up, when you could usually predict a Champions League group, without too much thought, because you just had a lot of elite level teams and some other teams that were sort of, I guess, coming to the table. It's not really quite as simple as that anymore. The quality of European football just continues to rise, which is really nice to see. What impact does that have on the FPL climate? Because obviously not FPL, sorry, the UCL Fantasy climate. Freudian slip there. But I mean, but we have seen it in FPL where the changing circumstances of the Premier League have, put us in a situation where we used to have, everybody just had three forwards. You had your Rooneys, your Ronaldos, and your Drogbas, and the pricing structure was kind of dictated around how teams played their football. And now, of course, we've gone through a wing-back era, and we've gone through an era of sort of inside forwards who are classified as midfielders, and a lot of people play 3-5-2 now. So that, just the way that the Champions League is evolving and the way that some of those other teams you've mentioned there are progressing, does that make UCL Fantasy more exciting? Does it make it more difficult? Does it make it harder to find the differentials? Or are there simply more differentials that other people overlook just because of preconceptions, but people with their ears to the ground maybe have more of an idea of who the up-and-coming players are? Though I imagine there's lots of different considerations.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think the things that came to my mind was there's a lot of players who are either heavily linked with Premier League players or that we're aware of. Like a lot of these names are becoming more household, either because, I mean, you could look wider and you could be like, oh, Ultimate Team on FIFA, like I recognize like that player, like he's got a good rating. So when I see him on fantasy, I'm like, oh yeah, he's a good rating. I want him because even though I've never seen him play, but he must be good. So you could go a bit wider than that, but I think as well, like there's a lot of, obviously jobs are very, I guess there's a like kind of like a merry-go-round of managers and players where maybe like a mid-table Premier League team will buy a player. The team didn't hit the target that they were meant to. They then go to a team in Europe for a lot cheaper because they don't have that kind of money, but they perform well, and so we'll recognize a few players. And I think from UCL Fantasy, from that perspective, because it is so many players, like 32 teams, like that, it is a lot for a fantasy game to try and figure out which are the best assets. And so that kind of familiarity that you have with some of the names from like who go deep into this competition, but then also the ones that you just happen, you're like, oh, there's no Premier League on, but there's a Bundesliga match. I'll just sit and watch this. It's kind of you start to recognize these players, and so when it comes to like Euros or World Cup, I think it helps out as well because one, you look great in front of your friends, being like, oh yeah, he's a good player here. But then also like it just gets you more invested in the overall tournament. Like if it wasn't for UCL Fantasy, I probably wouldn't care about half these matches. But I'm actually like invested in a ton of these teams now, so it's just kind of helps overall like enhance the football performance. You get attached to a few of these teams.
Well, yeah, if you thought it was in FPL when you get attached to watching West Brom v Burnley, well, play UCL Fantasy and get attached to, I don't know, I'm just going to pluck two names up. Copenhagen versus Galatasaray or something like that. I'd have no cause to be interested in that unless I had some fantasy assets in it for sure. So as you say, bottom line, it just helps enhance your enjoyment of, the biggest club competition in the world. I think I can say that without too much hate in the comments. I'm sure if Gianni Infantino might turn up and be like, excuse me, what about the Club World Cup? Well, okay, that's for another day.
Yeah, and I think it is a bittersweet moment because obviously this is the last group stage match of the Champions League, in its current format, because there'll be groups next year, but it's going to be totally different. It's a league format, so this is kind of like the end of this like keystone part of the tournament, because the groups are all going to change as well. So it just adds to the madness, to be honest.
Yeah, very much last day of term in every real sense. I mean, when you say it like that, it's just, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like for people watching this video, we're probably either in our 20s or our 30s, and so this is all we know of European club football. The format that it was sort of way back, the pre-Champions League era is more the sort of thing that perhaps our parents or that the generation between our parents and us really remember. Or like, I can't remember a time before this format of the Champions League. So, as you say, it is a bit of a cornerstone of our football society. So, hopefully people get good scores out of it as we bid farewell to it, and be interesting to see what the game is like next year in this particular stage of the tournament. Now, before we get on to how Aaron got on in Matchday 5 and what his plans are for Matchday 6, a few plugs as ever. You will, of course, obviously got a hint there that Aaron does know quite a lot about European football, and there's a reason for that. That is, of course, because he and his podcast partner Dan run the UCL Fantasy pod. I have this every week. We do these. The Fantasy UCL pod is the fantasy football community podcast, which features Dan from UCL Fantasy Pod as a guest alongside Lewis and Ed, and then of course Aaron is the other half of that, and he does these with me. Basically, just go and follow both of them on basically X or any of the other social media platforms you have, and your podcast platforms, and you'll get access to basically as much of that content as you like. And of course, we kind of scratch the surface on the YouTube channel. We kind of operate as a bit of a shop window for the fantasy football community podcast, and then of course Aaron's regular bag as well. Go and check those out if you want more detail. I know next to nothing about European football. I support Reading, so there's no point in me sticking my head above the parapet trying to work out what on earth is going on above about 15th in League One. So if you want more of that detail, then yeah, those places are the places to go. But if you need something that just kind of scratches the surface, then hopefully you enjoy this content as well. And as ever, I'm always going to be asking you guys, like the video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification as well, so you don't miss a thing. Right, that's the admin out of the way. So let's jump into Matchday 5. 88 points for you, which looks good on the surface. I'm kind of hoping that was above average, but it's always hard to tell because the app doesn't actually tell you what the average score was for the game week. So talk us through how Matchday 5 was and what it did for your overall rank.
Yeah, so I took a -4 as well, so that's always a positive. Not really, but it paid off really, really well because I needed to take that -4 in order to get in Saka, who obviously, as you can see there from my captain, went well. So I guess just going through my transfers first of all. So Vinicius Jr. came out. He came out for Mbappe, which I've never been so gutted that he scored. That was heart-wrenching, but we'll cover that later. Saka obviously did really, really well. So Mbappe and Saka were my captains on both days, partly because of the -4, which is why I didn't go for Kane. I did Saka to try and just pay off that -4. But as a result, it was meant to be get Bastoni to Rico Lewis. He only got 2 points, so I'm quite lucky with that. But when I did that transfer initially, I was just looking at it with all the budget I had left, and I'm like, surely there's someone around the 5 million mark that I can get. So I ended up getting Hummels, who got 5 points and then got the Player of the Match award. So 8 points in total. So like I'll take that all day long. So
yeah.
even though he didn't keep a clean sheet, he got 8 points. Obviously you get points for ball recoveries. So he got 11 ball recoveries, which got me 3 extra points, plus the Player of the Match. So that took care of the -4, and I got +2 points more than what. I mean, Bastoni didn't even appear, so as you can see on my bench, everybody got 0. So that's a net win of 4 points that I got from Hummels, and plus I was able to get Saka as a result. So it went really, really well. Obviously Bellingham is just. I think he's the best player in the world at the moment. I think a lot of people would agree.
I think so.
Cancelo, 14 points as well. Really, really good. Everyone else is just kind of in and around the normal numbers. But overall, it was a good match day.
Yeah, it looks particularly good, and the Hummels one as well is a nice one to come through. As you say, with the sort of decisions that you had to make in defence as well. So yeah, well done on that one. And also, is it nice when your entire bench gets 0 in UCL Fantasy, bearing in mind that you do actually obviously have to swap them in and out in FPL when they get nothing? At the very least, you didn't, ever. Well, maybe you perhaps did trifle with which one of them would or wouldn't start, but you obviously haven't had the dynamic of starting them and then taking them off and putting someone else in. So. That looks like an ideal bench, right? Or would you
Yeah.
rather there was some more options for later?
No, no, no. Like it makes me feel like a better manager, to be honest. Even though I mean, Azpilicueta didn't even come on, so that was all right. Henriks didn't play at all. Sommer didn't play, which a lot of people had him as their goalkeeper, and Jimenez zero with his own goal. He scored at the wrong side, um, but he did score. But yeah, in terms of my rank, it went really, really well. So I think I was about 165,000 on the last episode. I've went up to 54,500. So that's quite a
Nice.
big rank rise. As is expected with kind of so early in the competition. Um, and so then it leads me into the dilemma now in terms of what do I do for match day 6, and everybody's in the same boat. Like the hardest bit was when I'm getting ready for match day 6, and I'm like, right, who do I put on here? Literally, obviously, we know that fantasy content can be outdated really, really quick.
Yeah.
Um, but even more so with match day 6, we could listen to the press conferences, and it just changes. Um, so I these are I'll kind of, rather than being specific players, I'm going to kind of explain the thinking behind the team,
Okay.
and hopefully that makes more sense in terms of the transfer. And I've got the obviously my limitless draft, which is an option as well, but I'll explain a bit more about that when we get there.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to have a look at the games that are coming up first, and then have a look at your. You have a lot of decisions to make for match day 6, not just in terms of players, as you say, but also for that chip as well. In terms of your rank, then, so about 54,000. I'm guessing that's like a good place to be after match day 5. I mean, I suppose we often in FPL sort of give ourselves targets for where we would like to be at Christmas, because there's a bit of a break after that with the FA Cup coming in. Of course, there is going to be a big break in the Champions League once match day 6 is out of the way. The last 16, of course, is going to be, I think, in the sort of like late February, early March, kind of spring kind of time. So quite a big gap. Had you set yourself a target for rank bracket at the beginning of the season? Is there a kind of goal? Is there a set of goalposts you'd like to aim at for where you'd like to be after the group stage? Because it is, of course, much harder to make big ground up. The fewer teams there are left in the competition.
Yeah, I always try and aim around the 1% mark. It doesn't tell you how many exact players in the game. It just says over a million, so that could be anything. I think there was over 2 million once it went into the knockouts. People keep just joining the game. So once it got into the knockouts, I think it went over 2 million last year. So the goal was about 1%. And that's kind of just whereabouts I want to be. So in terms of at this moment, like historically, like I've done really, really well in the knockouts. And that's normally where I make up the most ground. So even when I've not used both chips in the group stage, I think last season was the first time I did that. It was my best rank, so I don't know. I guess I would want to test that and see if it was a fluke. But normally I would leave like one of my chips for the knockouts just to kind of get out of jail free card in case it all goes wrong and all the teams I predicted to win get knocked out. Um, but in terms of overall rank, like it is still really, really close. So like if I go into like some of my mini leagues, people who are 10 points ahead of me there, and they are in the 1% mark. So that's how close it is. So um if I can just make up 10 points, which I've still got my limitless, a lot of these people have played their limitless. So if I make up 10 points on everybody in my limitless chip, I'm looking to get into the 1% mark.
Nice, clear plan there, and yeah, it's always useful to have a chip in your back pocket after everyone has used it. That's very much talking point in FPL as well at the moment. Hold on to chips if you can. Let's move on to the fixtures for matchday 6 then. We'll start with the Tuesday night ones. And obviously, I usually ask you where the key battlegrounds are, but kind of in a similar vein to matchday 5, it's not just about what kind of matchup we have here. It's kind of like who's playing for what, you know? So, like, technically, Man United versus Bayern, despite the fact that Bayern should win that game like 8-0, no problem. Man United really, really need to win that game. Bayern Munich just really don't need to win that game, for example. So there's a few. It's a very tricky sort of unpredictable road, I suppose, match day 6. So yeah, I'm going to need your guidance to understand the nature of these games more than ever. So I'll go through them in terms of what we've got. So the two earlier games at 5:45 p.m. UK time is Lens versus Sevilla and PSV against Arsenal. That Man United Bayern Munich clash, as mentioned, is 8 p.m. on Tuesday, and then Copenhagen versus Galatasaray on at the same time, of course. Then the final four 8 p.m. matches are Napoli against Braga, Union Berlin against Real Madrid, Inter Milan against Real Sociedad, and Salzburg against Benfica. So yeah, what stands out here, and I suppose as ever, is there a clear standout captain who perhaps is more maverick, bearing in mind that Wednesday's the backup?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to obviously note is that with all the rotation going around, Group B is probably where you do want to make your safe transfers. Like if you have someone who you don't believe is going to play, or you know that are injured, the fact that we see definitely who starts for Group B before the deadline, I think has to, if you are looking to just get the points and run, um, even if it is just 2 or 3 points, if you just want to get them points and run, Group B is probably it. Um, so you definitely have to look at that. Arsenal already through, already top. PSV, so the advantage goes to them. Um, but I think in terms of how the group is, in terms of like head to head, it's already sorted. So it is a bit of a nightmare. Like PSV could lose and still go through. Um, but Lens, obviously, that match will come down to head to head for Europa League. Sevilla have not been great, but historically they always sneak into third place and then go on to win the Europa League. That's just their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Um, but Lens are playing, they've played really, really well. They're a team that I absolutely wrote off going into the Champions League. And I mean when they beat Arsenal, that says it all. Like they've played really, really well, other than the last time they played Arsenal, which was not very good. Um, but yeah, like that, I think that's really important if you do want to just avoid the rotation headache and just get people that you know are going to play. Them, the team news is going to be key. Obviously, Bayern Munich, Man United is a big one in terms of we probably have Bayern Munich assets. Are they going to be rotated? Are they going to be rested? Or are they going to? So people are saying that they're kind of have got nothing to play for. I don't think that's the German way, to be honest. They have been in this situation before, and they have a chance to set. I don't know if it's this match or whether it'll be in the next group stage match, but they have a chance to break a record. I think where they would have been undefeated for 30 consecutive group stage matches, which no other team has ever done before. And so they're playing for a bit of pride, like, and the chance to knock out a big name in the group stage and not have to worry about them later in the tournament.
Hmm.
Um,
They lost
which
at the
I
weekend as
like,
well, which is probably so the bit
yeah,
quite
heavily
ignominiously. Was it 5-1 against Eintracht Frankfurt?
5-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they need to bounce
And
back.
and that wasn't even a rotated side either. Like that was a full strength Bayern Munich side.
It's a wounded
So
animal now.
yeah, and just like from what we know of Tuchel, like he's not the type of manager. Like Bundesliga will take care of itself. They've got a winter break. I think they have the chance to knock out a big name, and they'll take it. Harry Kane will want to take it. Like I think I think they'll be fired up. I don't think it's in their nature to, like, they might not press with the same intensity, but I still think the quality is there. So a lot of people are saying, and I know I've got them in one of my drafts, but Man United assets, obviously with everything to play for, I think they have to play their full strength team. So that is a positive in terms of predicting the lineup. Um, but I think with Group A, other than Bayern Munich, we know that the other three teams are going to play their strongest 11. So obviously Galatasaray have some good assets as well. I think the biggest question marks after that is Real Madrid. Are they going to rotate? Is Bellingham going to play? I wish I had the answer. I don't at the moment. But if Bellingham does play, I think he is a very good captain shout for Group C for the Tuesday, just because he's only finished under 10 points once that he's actually played, and he got seven still. Like so, I think that's a great shout, a very safe floor in terms of points. And then obviously you've got Napoli against Braga. I think the winner of that goes through. Um, so I think as long as Braga win by 2 goals, so Napoli won't want that. And it's in Italy, so that'll be an interesting match. And then Real Sociedad Inter for the top spot. I think Real Sociedad are the favourites, and they've got a lot of cheaper assets. If you do need to try and make some budget transfers, Inter are just the absolute trolls of this season and just got through this group stage playing a second team. When we know they were capable of so much more. So it'll be Real Sociedad were the better team when they played each other the first time round, like comfortably. Inter did a smash and grab. So I think Real Sociedad players, obviously, Mendes, who I think we all have, he's the top point scorer so far in the tournament. He's injured with a broken arm, so we do need to try and look for an alternative there. But it's going to be like this. We're going to hear a lot of rotation. But that's going to be an absolute key match. Is who finishes top? Because Inter and Real Sociedad will not want to play any of the pot one teams in the next round.
Yeah, good point. I'd forgotten about that. Another consideration as well, just to try and give yourself a better last 16 draw as well. May perhaps fire some teams up over some others. Let's move on to Wednesday then. So we've got Leipzig against Young Boys. We've got Red Star against Man City. Atletico Madrid versus Lazio. Celtic against Feyenoord. Dortmund against Paris Saint-Germain. And then we've got Newcastle versus AC Milan, which is big game for all sorts of reasons. We've got Porto hosting Shakhtar Donetsk and Antwerp against Barcelona. So, as ever, we're looking for more sure captains on Wednesday in case the Tuesday ones don't go so well. We've got the group of death coming to its conclusion. Newcastle coming in off the back of a pretty unfortunate result against Spurs. So, yeah, all sorts of cool narratives that we as football fans love going into the Wednesday games as well. Unless, of course, you are a Newcastle fan, in which case you're probably petrified. But yeah. We actually have one of those. Aaron, how are you feeling?
Well, I've got my top on for today.
Oh, nice.
So I think, yeah, I am nervous. I'm trying to get a ticket to the match as well, and it's filling me with nerves already. But especially because I think it'll be nice. It'll be full circle because AC Milan were the team that got me into football, so it'll be kind of like a good full circle type thing. But the nerves, oh man, yeah, it's we're a very very tired team. Um, uh, it. I was having a debate the other day where with Dan actually, should Eddie Howe have just accepted the L and just at least rested his starting 11, like field a completely weakened team, um, and just who knows if they got a result, great, but at least rest in the team, and he's just not done that. He's not. I don't think like it is that question of is that what's missing from his kind of repertoire to be like an elite manager is just that kind of because you can say yes we'll focus on the next game, but you have to focus on the next game of each tournament and how you're going to win each one. So I think by playing the exact same starting 11 for 5 games in a row, and if a majority have played 90 in every single game, uh, Milan are going through an injury crisis themselves. I think it's going to be really really tough, but the energy, yeah, St James's Park has to be absolutely bouncing. Um, but Dortmund, I think every Newcastle fan has just turned into a Dortmund fan as well. We need them to do us a favor. Obviously, from that very controversial penalty that they got in the last minute against us. But obviously the group of death, none of these positions are secure. This whole table can flip round. Obviously, Dortmund are qualified, so they'll finish first and second. But the other three teams could finish second, third, and fourth. I think Paris Saint-Germain can finish first, second, and third. But all the like it just shows how this table can change. It's almost like the last day of the season,
Mm.
where you're just watching the table to see what's happening. So, and you're like listening to what's like happening at the other ground. So Paris Saint-Germain are not a good away team. I think that Milan showed that they beat them 2-1. Newcastle showed that, beat them 4-1. Dortmund will want to secure a top spot. They don't want to be playing any pot one teams, especially if they know that they're going into the group like they've won the last ever group of death. I think that's a pub quiz question if there was one. Um, I think in terms of a fantasy perspective, though, this is going to be a group where everyone plays their strongest team, that they have available. Obviously, injuries permitting. So I think players like Mbappe are safe. Um, some of the Milan players, they are going through an injury crisis. Leao will not be there, and they only have one fit centre back. Um, they have Theo Hernandez, who's arguably one of the best left backs in the world, playing at centre back, which massively like neutralizes his threat that he can have. Um, so that helps Newcastle a little bit. Both these teams going through an injury crisis, but well, obviously you'll be able to see who's ruled out on the app. Normally it doesn't update until halfway through Monday. So, but I don't recommend making transfers until you see Arsenal's team news, anyways. Um, but Group F, they're going to play their strongest 11. And then it goes into Group H, which is the next most competitive. Barcelona need to beat Antwerp or draw with Antwerp to secure top spot. Barcelona have qualified, but it's really interesting with Porto and Shakhtar. If Shakhtar win and Barcelona lose somehow to Antwerp, which I don't see happening, but if they do, Shakhtar will finish top. Um, Barcelona second, Porto third. But if Porto win, it'll finish as it is. So it's really interesting. Like Barcelona's place isn't secure, because they lost that game to Shakhtar. So do Barcelona rotate? That is a big question mark. They've got injuries themselves. But in terms of the other two groups, E and G, I think these are a nightmare. Group G is finished. So Man City, we know Haaland is injured. All the drama kind of around that.
Yeah.
But Group G's finished. Who knows what team Man City are going to put out? We just don't know. Um, and I think it's just going to be the youngsters. We're going to get like a Rico Lewis. We're going to get Oscar Bob, cheap players. So if you do need to make a transfer and you just fancy a little bit of a punt on an English team, I think you're just going to look for them. Like we don't know who the goalkeeper could be. Edison might get rested. It's just going to be an absolute nightmare. Um, and so it's up to you whether you want to take that risk or not. Um, Group E, it's Atletico Madrid versus Lazio for top spot. Other than that, it's all sorted. Feyenoord against Celtic. It's still a really good match. So if you do have a Feyenoord asset, he might still be a good shout. But Atletico Madrid at home, Lazio are not very good away from home. So Atletico Madrid assets might be a good shout as well because they'll field a strong team, in order to obviously secure top spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd probably back Atletico in that one as well. So, yeah, definitely one to look out for as well. Let's let's move on to the season ticker just before we get into your team because, obviously it changes with each week, but we still got some teams in green and some teams in pink and red. We are seeing a repeat of match day 1 here, I suppose. But obviously things have changed drastically. I suppose the problem is with season tickers is that, again, the difficulty of the fixture doesn't reflect all of the considerations you've just mentioned, which makes it very hard to season tick the Champions League.
Yeah, it depends on what they're doing with the league as well, like how they're doing, who the next match is actually against. And so yeah, for a lot of these teams, like Man City, for example, they'll want Haaland ready for the Club World Cup. Um, and so it's like, why would you risk him in a game that doesn't mean anything? So yeah, it is just that's where the absolute madness of match day 6 comes in, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
Hmm. Well, currently, I suppose, without wanting to make it sound like you don't know what you're doing, in theory, you technically don't know what you're doing yet, because you have some decisions to make, and I guess you're not too sure which route you'll go down ahead of match day 6. You could either play your Limitless or not play your Limitless, and so what I've got on the screen right now is your bus team without a Limitless. Do you want to talk us through this and I guess what the pros are in not playing the Limitless now? And yeah, if you could go through each player for the benefit of the podcast, so if you could just list them out, and then they can see what your team is and what your plans are if you were to not use the
Yeah.
Limitless.
So in goal, my goalkeepers would stay with Blast Switch and Sommer, playing on different days, which is key. So if you do make a goalkeeper switch, don't have them play on the same day, just so you can rotate. I would still have Cancelo. He is probably going to get rested though. He's someone who I would like to get rid of, but I don't want to take a -4 for that. Um, Henriks would end up staying in. He's not been playing a lot lately, which does make him a candidate to play in this match. Hummels against Hakimi. Obviously they're both in. Hakimi scored against Dortmund in the first match day. I do think his floor is quite low though, but obviously he has sky's the limit for his ceiling. Hummels, I think, is a safe. Like he's only the lowest points he's had was 4, and I would take that on a Wednesday player, because I just need him to outscore a 2-pointer who I'm subbing off. And then I've got Livramento as my transfer out for Azpilicueta, finally out my team. It would not surprise me though that Azpilicueta would start this match, and gets a clean sheet. Just that's just how it goes. But Livramento, he's 4.3 million. He's played really well. And I think a lot of what AC Milan will do will be down the right wing. It was against when Newcastle played them at the San Siro. A lot of it was down that right wing. I think Chukwueze is going to be the right winger. And then potentially Calabria or Florenzi will play on the right as right back. So they're both really good players. So Livramento has a potential for ball recovery points, but he is quicker than all of them. So that gives in terms of a counter attack. Obviously, I would love to have Trippier, but funds are not there.
Mm.
Midfield, Kimmich stays in the team. I do think that he's pretty solid to stay in the team. 6.5. And then he'll be on a few set pieces. Not necessarily like direct free kicks, but he'll be the one like crossing it from corners and stuff like that. Bellingham is in the team at the moment just because everybody else has him, and he'll probably still get a price rise. So you don't want to take him out to then have to buy him back for more in the round of 16. Even though you get the extra budget. Saka is in there, and he's just kind of a placeholder at the moment because I don't think he'll play, but I want to have an Arsenal midfielder. So that would potentially just be any Arsenal midfielder who's starting, just so I know. I've got Anthony Gordon. Obviously, he's on a bit of a streak for Newcastle at home. Away from home, he hasn't been amazing, but at home, I think he's got like a run of 5 or 6 games with an attack and return. So obviously for 5.5 million, that's a great shout. Galeno is my transfer in. So he got 19 points in match day 1. He scored 2 goals and got an assist. So at home, I'm looking for him to repeat that. He's came back from injury, and he's straight back into the starting 11 in a game that Porto have to win. And then my strikers just stay the same. Mbappe against Dortmund, Jimenez against Celtic, Kane against Man United.
Yeah, big front line, especially with Mbappe and Kane there for sure. Kane, I think, I kind of feel like Kane's going to relish a trip to Old Trafford. Hasn't been there in a while. Man United famously linked with him, show them what they're missing out by signing Højlund instead of him. So yeah, I think that could be a good one. So obviously this team involves just the 2 changes. And so, yeah, your considerations for the Limitless. What what factors would make you go with this over the Limitless team, which we'll have in a second? I suppose the question really becomes, where would you use the Limitless if you don't use it now? And do you feel like this team can cope with this week, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, so obviously the expectation for points in match day 6 isn't very high. So I'd be in the same boat as everybody else. A few factors for me to use my Limitless is the fact that the Limitless chip hasn't worked for anybody else. Like there's not been one match day where those who have used the Limitless has massively paid off. So that like kind of like the gap of points has been very similar. So I think a lot of people used it in match day 2, and some people used it kind of match day 4 or match day 5. And a lot of people like the points are still very grouped together. So in terms of it doesn't work out, I'm in the same boat where the Limitless hasn't worked for anybody. If it does work out though, like I said earlier, where match day 6, if you get a good score, it's massively separates you from everybody else. Um, and so if it pays off, I'm able to just get rid of all of the people who are questionable to play, focus on people who have to play their strongest 11s and not have any budget restrictions in terms of obviously I don't want to just go for all the expensive players. I want the people who I know are going to play. So that's what I think people hate about the chip. If it was just a free hit, I think people would have a lot more success. But the lack of budget restrictions is an absolute like it just messes your head.
It's a poison chalice.
So yeah, because when you start to choose between, say, for example, the Bayern Munich wingers, and you've got Sane, who's the most expensive, Nabry, who's zero point 0.5 cheaper, and Coman, without the budget restrictions, you're like, all right, I'll just go Sane, even though Coman might be the better option.
Hmm.
So that's the difficulty of it. If it pays off though, I think the potential is massive. And if it doesn't pay off, um, then I'm in the same boat as everyone else. Another consideration I've got is in according to my team, the Tuesday Wednesday split is not very friendly. I guess that's just me not really looking ahead. Um, so, but when I've looked at match day 6, I end up only having 5 Tuesday players, um, and it's not really spread out. And with match day 6, I want to get as many Tuesday players in as I can, or just make it more even, just to avoid the benching headache of um who do I sub off and who do I not when it comes to the Wednesday players on my bench. And so in terms of how my team is made up, it's not fantastic. So that is another consideration. So
Well, I've stuck your Limitless team on the screen now, as your Limitless draft, I should say, where you, in theory, could address some of the issues you've mentioned there. Frustratingly, it doesn't show you the prices because, of course, the price is irrelevant. It just gives you the date of their fixture or in terms of the screenshot from the app. But yeah,
yeah,
big
I
names.
switched that. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I
was it you?
switched that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you can switch the the price, like the date and stuff like that. So um I thought I was going to be clever in doing that to show when people play.
No, but
But
that's useful. But if the thing is, with it being a limitless chip, obviously the cost doesn't matter anyway. So it is the most useful way for display. I do apologise for the comment. Don't worry,
that's all right.
you've not put a foot wrong. Talk us through if
So
you could list it through for the podcast listeners, and then talk us through sort of some decisions.
yeah, so the full team, its value is 112.6 million.
Nice.
So Ramsdale as the goalkeeper, obviously I'll get to see if it's going to be Ramsdale or Rhea. But I don't know why. I just I probably need a bit more time to know the Tuesday goalkeeper, but that was just kind of like I do think PSV will score. So I don't think that is I don't think it's going to be another 5-0 performance. Oblak was the other one. just because Lazio are not a great away team, and Azpilicueta has just had my life. He's just been absolutely laughing at me. So, Oblak, he's the most expensive Atletico Madrid player, but with a Limitless, I don't mind, and he's more likely to play than me having to try and guess out of. I think they've got 8 centre backs in their squad. I don't
Wow.
know which 3 are going to play. Um, then in terms of my defense, Teo Hernandez, um, I had him just because if Giroud ends up getting subbed off, Teo Hernandez is on penalties. Um, even though he's at centre back. So I think his ball recovery is there. And if they have to change stuff around, he will go back to left back. Um, and I think the battle between him and Trippier, it will be really interesting. I've got Trippier as well. Um, just because set pieces, he's really good with the ball recovery points. And because of what he does, he's really good for player of the match. Um, Hakimi Hummels stay in there. Di Lorenzo makes it in though as a Tuesday defender. My midfield is normally where is where I've got a lot of the Tuesday players. So Galino's still in there. Saka's there, but just kind of insert any Arsenal midfielder there. Bellingham's still in there as the captaincy shout. I've got Bruno Fernandes in there. Which on my podcast I was like, I do not like that idea, but I just don't think I wanted to give Dan the satisfaction. Um, but if Man United are to win, Bruno Fernandes will have to have a good match, and if he doesn't, I just sub him out. Um, he's on penalties, um, and all the set pieces, and if he does well, he's the prime candidate for player of the match, isn't he? So I think his ceiling for points is really high. And then I've got Zaha just because he's also a good shout. He might be injured though. So I've just got to keep an eye on that one. Strikers, Mbappe, and the other 2 are Griezmann and Osimhen. So Osimhen is back. He played a full 90 minutes. Um, he might be an early rotate like substitution risk, but I do think that Napoli have to win. And so it's at home against Braga, and I think Osimhen could grab a goal just to get his minutes back and his feet back. But I do think he'll probably be subbed off for some of the other players there. And Griezmann, Atletico Madrid have to win, and they're in good form. So that one is a bit of a because I'm on Limitless. I'm going Griezmann over Morata, even though Morata you could argue is in the better form. So that one might be a poison chalice,
Another one we spend too much money just because you can.
pretty much, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Well, I mean, it certainly looks like an exciting team. I suppose my final question on this is there anything that you're expecting that or perhaps information you don't have yet? Of course, press conferences will be happening across the next couple of days, and people might be listening to this before or after those have happened. But is there anything else that you're sort of waiting on that would help tip the balance one way or the other between these 2 different teams? Because they're 2 very different approaches, and both could be successful. Both could be the wrong move. Who knows? So yeah, is there anything else that you feel like might be a light bulb moment in your mind between now and the deadline to help you make a decision?
I think a lot of it is going to come down to whether Saka starts or not. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to see the team news. If Saka starts, I potentially am more inclined to not use the Limitless. And I think you asked earlier when I would use it instead. I'd probably use it in the round of 16 second leg, as that's when the kind of more worst teams are still left in the tournament. And I kind of know the permutations in terms of who needs to get what, which ties are already sorted and which ones aren't, because they can still rotate in that second leg round of 16. So I'd potentially use it then if I didn't use it now. But if I see Saka starting, I potentially use it here, and that's what I potentially not use it and just try and ride it out with my team. If Saka I see is getting rested, which I do think is more likely, I think I'm just going to try and Limitless just because I'd be left. Saka's too expensive to just be sitting on the bench not playing at all. Um, and yeah, I'd probably Limitless then.
Okay, yeah, so certainly some things that can help you make a decision, and it's nice that the team news might actually be impactful for something, because then it sort of rewards you for making sure that you make your decisions at the right time. So yeah, we'll see what happens there, and yeah, of course, as we said at the beginning, it's very much a farewell to the group stages for this year, but also in their current format. So yeah, sad times, but hey, we move on. Such is football in the modern era; everything is in flux. Of course, the Champions League will be back in the new year, and so if you've enjoyed these videos, and of course, we'll make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and hit the bell notification, etc., so that you guys know when we're back with these videos. The same also goes for the two podcasts that we always are kind of acting as a shop window for, at Fantasy UCL Pod for the Fantasy Football Community edition, and at UCL Fantasy Pod for Aaron and Dan. There's a sliding scale of detail. You're going to get loads more detail with Dan and Aaron than you will with this Reading fan who doesn't watch nearly enough European football. So make sure you check those out. Also, Fantasy Football Scout membership is also still available. It's kind of useful for the Premier League teams when you're doing UCL Fantasy, but I'm imagining most of you watching probably also play FPL, so make sure you sign up for that. You can still get 20% off. That's all the housekeeping I have to do, Aaron, unless there's anything you'd like to add before we let everybody go.
No, just best of luck, and whatever your score is in match day 6, everybody will be in a very similar boat, and in the knockouts you can still make up a lot of ground.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always going to be there's always going to be more opportunities for some good fun with Champions League in the new year. So hopefully it continues to be fun when we get to that stage of the competition. Well, with that, we shall leave you fine, folks, to the rest of your preparations, either for Match Day 6 of UCL Fantasy or Game Week 17 of FPL, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.